Okey, semua sihat?
Sihat, Madam.
Ya, okey. Okey, today kita nak cover tajuk we continue daripada last topic ya. Last topic kita dah cover tajuk risk and materiality. Jadi kita nak cover tajuk risk. Tajuk risk ni dia macam, dia tak susah tapi dia macam you kena faham step by step sebab dia banyak the questions normally dia banyak tanya about the relationship between one the risk and materiality ataupun between the risk. Kemudian kadang-kadang soalan juga nak tanya something like the relationship between risk and materiality level. Okay, so Sherry start the class.
Boleh, Madam.
Sekali. So penat sikit today sebab apa ni, pagi tadi pergi office, ada meeting dan ada kelas. Kita bergegas baru balik rumah, baru sampai rumah. Sekejap atas saya boleh macam salah pula. Okay, so we start daripada we already cover materiality. Okay, today kita nak tengok audit risk. Okay, what's the meaning of audit risk? Boleh ya? Share start? Okay. Basically, audit risk adalah in general, no auditor would purposely give the wrong opinion on the financial statement. When we say audit risk, meaning that there is a possibility that when you issue audit report, we issue inappropriate audit report. Maksud inappropriate audit report meaning that dalam that financial statement may contain material misstatement. But when we issue the audit report, we issue unqualified audit report. Faham dia Kasih? The meaning of audit risk? The first thing yang you kena faham adalah what is audit risk. You faham? Nak I ulang lagi sekali?
Boleh, Doktor.
Boleh faham ya? Okay. Bila kita kata audit risk, meaning that we might issue inappropriate audit opinion. Technically, kita tak adalah nak issue inappropriate audit opinion kan. If possible, we try our best, we try to accumulate sebanyak mungkin audit evidence, we try to increase the sample size. Kita akan buat some of the audit test, audit procedures, and then we try to test, we try to get at least 95% level of significance. We believe that 95% the financial statement do not contain material misstatement. Kalau ada misstatement pun maybe ada, but as far as we concern, the misstatement is not material, okay? But still there are wrong occurrence for whatever reason. Auditors, however, need to, what we need to do adalah we need to minimize the audit risk, okay? So, macam mana you nak tahu the audit risk? This one we talk about the audit risk model, okay? So now look at the definition class, definition of the audit risk. So basically, auditor accepts some level of uncertainty in performing the audit function. Basically, kita accept at 95% level of significance, okay? So because kenapa? Sebab some of the evidence, sometimes you obtain the evidence, but the evidence pun kita ada different level of reliability. Some evidence high level of reliability and some evidence low level of reliability. Okay. Kenapa? Why we cannot give assurance that financial statement is 100% correct. Okay. Meaning that kita tak boleh bagi macam when we express our opinion, we just say that in our opinion the financial statement show true and fair view. The meaning of true and fair view meaning that ada material misstatement, but the misstatement as far as we concern, the misstatement is not material. Okay. Number one adalah due to the reliability of evidence. But some evidence is not reliable. The second one adalah due to the internal control system, meaning that some of the company they have weak internal control system. Okay. And the third one is due to the uncertainty. So apa yang auditor need to do adalah we need to reduce the uncertainty to all tolerable level. So what we need to do as the auditor, we need to ensure that we should have adequate planning, proper supervise, okay, conduct the audit in accordance, we follow all the requirement of auditing standard. And at the same time, we have to ensure that we need to maintain high quality of audit. Okay, so kita cover this one dalam tajuk audit quality. Why we need to do all this thing? Because we want to ensure that we will issue appropriate audit opinion. Okay. The meaning of tolerable error, uncertainty and misstatement adalah the amount of preliminary judgment about materiality that is allocated to the financial statement. That's the reasons why bila kita calculate when we set the materiality level, okay, sometimes we set the materiality level at the lower level ataupun at the higher level. Okay, but as you go on, you conduct the audit, your judgment might be different. Okay, bila your judgment might be different, so we might change the materiality level. Sama ada we increase the materiality level or we reduce the materiality level. Okay, normally bila kita set the materiality level, normally the auditor use their own judgment, their own professional judgment. Dan kalau you rasa kalau kita guna our own professional judgment, auditor A, auditor B, auditor C pergi tempat yang sama, they might have different materiality level. Okay. So next one kita tengok adalah definition of the audit risk. This topic you kena tahu banyak definition kelas ya. Baca what is the definition of audit risk. Basically when we say audit risk adalah, so there is a possibility that the auditors give inappropriate opinion when the financial statement are materially misstated, meaning that ada material misstatement in the financial statement, tetapi the auditor issue unqualified audit report. Okay, boleh faham kelas ya? Is it clear? Faham ya what is it mean the audit risk? So what you may need to do adalah the auditor should plan that we should perform the audit test. We need conduct compliance test as well as substantive audit procedures to reduce the
audit the risk to an acceptable level. We cannot eliminate 100% audit risk, class, but we try to minimize the audit risk as low as possible. Macam mana you nak reducekan audit risk? We need to increase the sample size. Kalau you rasa macam client punya internal control system is very poor, ada integrity issue and so on, so the more we need to accumulate the audit evidence. Okay? Tetapi bila kita kata acceptable low level, it is still very subjective sebab kita tak ada proper guidance. Okay? Walaupun kita kata mungkin bagi kita 10,000 adalah the lowest materiality level that we can set. Okay, tetapi maybe for the other auditor, it should be less than 10,000. Okay, because dia depends pada your experience, your competency, as well as how willing you are to accept the risk. Some auditor, they are willing to accept the risk. Some auditor, they are not willing to accept the risk. Kalau you tak willing to accept the risk, you have to accumulate more audit evidence. Kalau you are willing to accept the risk, kita akan accumulate less audit evidence. Okay? So this one we call it as the acceptable audit risk. Berapa banyak you nak accept? How willing you are to accept the risk. That one we call it as the acceptable audit risk. Okay, acceptable audit risk dengan audit risk are two different things. Okay, kelas ya. Kalau acceptable audit risk adalah how willing you are to accept that the financial statement may contain material misstatement after you conduct compliance tests as well as after you conduct substantive audit procedures and when you issue unqualified opinion. Okay, so bila kita kata acceptable audit risk, normally if you are not willing to take the risk, you akan set the acceptable audit risk at 5%. 5% meaning that we are going to do the test at 95% level of significance. Okay, to be on the safe side, normally auditor will set the acceptable audit risk at 5%. Tetapi dia depends lah because we are in social science. Kadang-kadang kalau you are willing to take more risk, maybe you akan set acceptable audit risk at 10%, or you may set the acceptable audit risk at 15% or at 20%. Tetapi cannot be too high. Okay, acceptable audit risk we try to keep as minimum as possible. The lowest one adalah 5%. Bila 5%, meaning that we test at 95% level of significance. Faham ke kelas the difference between audit risk and acceptable audit risk? Boleh ya? Okay. Okay, acceptable audit risk meaning that the lower the acceptable audit risk, katakanlah bahawa you punya acceptable audit risk 5%, and then another person acceptable audit risk adalah 20%. They are willing to take the risk. Okay. The lower the acceptable audit risk, we need to accumulate more audit evidence. Kita akan increasekan the sample size. Okay. The higher the acceptable audit risk, you kena tahu ya, all this relationship ya, sebab soalan akan tanya more on relationship. Okay. The higher the acceptable audit risk, this one 20%, am I right? The audit risk is very acceptable, audit risk is high. You are willing to take the risk that the financial statement contain material misstatement. Okay, so you akan reducekan the sample size. Faham kelas this part? The lower the acceptable audit risk, the higher the sample size. The higher the lower the acceptable audit risk, the lower the sample size. The lower the acceptable audit risk, the higher the sample size. Okay, the higher the acceptable audit risk, the lower is the sample size. Dia adalah inverse relationship between between acceptable audit risk and audit evidence. Okay, boleh faham? Boleh faham ya kelas?
Boleh, madam.
Boleh ya? So basically as I mentioned earlier, we cannot eliminate audit risk, okay? Tetapi we can reduce the audit risk at minimum level, okay? So what are the factors that contribute kepada audit risk, okay? So these are the factors that may contribute kepada audit risk. Number one adalah nature of the test. Because when we conduct the test, we based on sample and we never do 100% test. Okay, so bila kita based on sample, sometimes maybe the sample yang kita tak pilih, not being selected, ada material misstatement. And that's the reasons why we not be able to detect that material misstatement. Okay, the second one adalah due to the inherent limitation. For the example, like internal control system. The client ada good internal control system, tetapi sometimes it might be due to the human error, carelessness, faulty judgment, or management, they have the internal control system, but management override the internal control system ataupun due to the communication breakdown. Okay. Next one adalah the drawing of audit conclusion normally based on the audit evidence, and audit evidence normally is more persuasive rather than conclusive. Sebab kita pun manusia juga kan. Kadang-kadang auditor bila kita pilih sampel, then you notice that sample tu macam banyak masalah. Okay, so we have the tendency to put back the sample dan kita pilih item yang lain as our sample. Okay, faham ya kelas ya? Okay, now kita tengok audit risk model. Audit risk model adalah the element of audit risk lah. What are the factors that contribute to the high audit risk or low audit risk? Okay, untuk audit risk model, dia punya formula adalah audit risk adalah inherent risk times control risk times dengan detection risk. The one that we need to calculate adalah detection risk. Detection risk adalah, this audit risk ni dia lebih kurang dia sama dengan acceptable audit risk ya. How willing you are to accept that the financial statement may contain material misstatement. Ya. So when we calculate detection risk is equivalent to acceptable audit risk, normally 5%. Or you can set lah, kalau you willing to take the risk, you akan set acceptable audit risk at 20%. Okay, kalau you are not willing to take the risk, kita akan set the acceptable audit risk at the lowest percentage, which is 5% lah ya. So divide dengan inherent risk times dengan control risk. This one should be inherent risk ya kelas ya. And this one should be acceptable audit risk. Okay, this is the formula how to calculate the detection risk. Kenapa you kena calculate detection risk? Because kalau based on detection risk, we should be able to determine either we should increase the sample size or we should reduce the sample size. Faham ke kelas? Nanti kita akan tengok some calculation after this. Okay, boleh faham ya? This acceptable audit risk ni you yang top management yang kena decide ya. Only audit senior yang boleh decide the acceptable audit risk. 5%, 10%, 15% ataupun 20%. Tetapi kalau you nak selamat, kalau you nak defend yourself, kalau ada court case later on, kita try to set the acceptable audit risk at 5%. Okay? Now kita tengok apa itu inherent risk. Inherent risk adalah the risk of material misstatement ignoring internal control system. So, you masuk saja company tu, you tengok dia punya management dia macam mana, accounting system dia macam mana, dia punya complexity of the transaction. So kat kepala kita, kita boleh compute the inherent risk. Okay, before kita evaluate client internal control system. Some industry dia adalah high risk company, so dia punya inherent risk adalah tinggi. Some industry dia adalah low risk company, so the inherent risk adalah rendah, low inherent risk. Okay, some company kalau you banyak location, ada branch dekat overseas, so dia punya inherent risk adalah tinggi. So kalau you nak tahu what inherent risk adalah the risk before you evaluate client internal control system. Dia punya keywords adalah ignoring internal control system. Faham kelas apa itu inherent risk? Macam kita lah nak lintas jalan kan, You pergi tempat jalan yang macam jalan raya yang macam penuh sesak tu, kalau you nak lintas macam tu saja, the inherent risk adalah very high. Kalau you nak lalu depan sekolah, kawasan lengah-lengah, you lintas jalan macam tu je, the inherent risk adalah low. Okay. Second one adalah control risk. Control risk adalah internal control system. Okay, control risk kita evaluate. After we evaluate the internal control system, tetapi based on your evaluation, the internal control system will not be able to prevent and detect. Always guna perkataan prevent and detect fraud and error. They have the internal control system, but the internal control system not be able to prevent and to detect fraud and error. Okay. Kalau control risk dia bagus, so control risk dia adalah low. Low meaning that good internal control system. Kalau kalau internal control dia poor internal control system, so the control risk adalah high. Okay, sama lah juga inherent risk ya. Kalau dia punya risk is high, inherent risk. Kalau risk dia tinggi, inherent risk dia pun akan jadi tinggi. Macam company tu very complicated ya. So dia punya inherent risk adalah tinggi. Kalau tak, the inherent risk adalah rendah. Okay. Ataupun kalau you tengok company tu ada financial problem, so the inherent risk adalah tinggi. Dominant by one person, the inherent risk also very high. Nanti kejap lagi kita akan tengok ya. The example, under what situation we consider the company high inherent risk ataupun low inherent risk. Okay. That one kita akan tengok later on. Okay. So kita just look at this formula dulu ya. Next one adalah detection risk. Detection risk adalah the risk that auditor substantive testing fail to detect fraud and error. Okay, detection risk is more on auditor lah. You not be able to detect fraud and error. You dah conduct audit test, you dah conduct audit procedures, you dah buat test of compliance test as well as substantive audit procedures, but you still not be able to detect material misstatement. Kenapa? Tak ada proper supervision, tak ada proper planning, tak competence, you are not well versed in that industry and so on. Okay. So untuk inherent risk and control risk, this one adalah uncontrollable. You cannot control the inherent risk and control risk. Okay, auditor can only control the detection risk. Faham kelas ya? We cannot control inherent risk and control risk, but as the auditor, we can only control the detection risk. Okay? Faham ya? Nanti nanti akan faham, nanti kita akan tengok detail later on all this risk. Okay? Baca kelas what is inherent risk. Okay, macam mana you nak assess inherent risk? You boleh assess inherent risk based on your experience and professional judgment. Okay. Control risk adalah based on client internal control system. Kalau client internal control system is good, the control risk is low. Kalau client internal control system is poor, the control risk is high. Dia adalah adverse relationship. Okay. Between control risk, between audit risk and control risk. Yeah, client internal control system will not be able to detect and prevent fraud and error on timely basis. Okay, detection risk adalah the remaining risk. Material misstatement will not be able to detect by the auditor. You dah buat substantive audit procedures, tetapi you still not be able to detect material misstatement. Okay, now we look at two situations here. Payroll cycle and inventory cycle. So untuk payroll cycle, dia punya system is very straightforward. Okay, payroll cycle dia punya system is not complicated. Okay, you bayar gaji, you salah bayar gaji, kalau ada mistake, so your staff will inform you lah. Okay, yang you lebih bayar gaji dia ke, tu kurang bayar gaji dia ke, and so on. Okay, so our assessment on the payroll cycle adalah inherent risk kita adalah low. Okay, we expect few misstatement. So our assessment untuk payroll cycle, the inherent risk is low. Untuk inventory, because inventory can be very complicated kan. Kadang-kadang you ada inventory in different warehouse. Kat public warehouse pun ada, kat private warehouse pun ada inventory in transit and in different location, okay. So we expect many misstatement. So kita punya assessment on inherent risk untuk inventory adalah high. Okay, untuk internal control system, our assessment on internal control system, normally untuk payroll cycle, the control risk is low. Sebab payroll cycle, dia punya cycle is very simple, then we expect few misstatement, okay. Tetapi untuk inventory, we do expect banyak misstatement ataupun ada possibility that the client not be able to detect and prevent fraud and error. Jadi our assessment on control risk untuk inventory adalah high. Okay, how willing you are to accept sama ada the financial statement may contain material misstatement. We are not willing. Katakanlah bahawa we are not willing, so we set low acceptable audit risk. Under the situation, let's say, you set the acceptable audit risk adalah 5%. So when we calculate the detection risk, untuk payroll cycle, the detection risk adalah high, dan untuk inventory, the detection risk adalah low. Okay, so the implication here adalah for payroll cycle, kita akan reducekan the sample size. The higher the detection risk, so kita akan accumulate low sample size, low audit then. Untuk inventory, kalau detection risk dia adalah low, so kita akan increasekan kita punya sample size ataupun audit evidence. Okay, kelas sekejap. Kita check kat sini, kita buat calculation kat sini ya. Let's say we have two scenario A and scenario B. Sekejap ya kelas ya. Okay ya, let's say kita ada dua scenario kat sini ya. I padamkan this one kelas ya. Kita tengok detection risk. So the detection risk adalah acceptable audit risk, inherent risk, control risk. Let's say we have two scenarios. Acceptable audit risk, we are not willing to take the risk, okay? So that we set the acceptable audit risk 5%. So scenario 1, detection risk. So acceptable audit risk adalah 0.05%. Scenario 2, detection risk. Acceptable audit risk also 0.05%. 5% saja ya. Okay, detection risk, katakanlah bahawa inherent risk. Dalam scenario 1, kita rasa macam company tu dia punya inherent risk is very high. Macam is very high, maybe they are in a very competitive industry. Ataupun maybe sebab dia punya dominant by 1%. Okay, poor internal, we are not talking about internal control system ya. Maybe profitability ratio is very high, dapat loss saja and so on. So the inherent risk, let's say 100%. 100% meaning that 1. And controls, internal control system pun very poor. Okay, and then the internal control system, our evaluation on internal control system, let's say very poor lah ya. We make it 1. Kita make it extreme figure, okay? So when we calculate detection risk here, the detection risk adalah 5%. Okay, under scenario number 2, okay, based on our evaluation, let's say inherent risk adalah 60%, meaning that 0.6. Dan katakanlah bahawa control risk also we evaluate at 60%. So how many percent is it the detection risk class? How many percent is the detection risk? 13%, am I right? Any one of you dah dapat jawapan?
13, madam.
How many percent?
13, madam.
13%, eh? So 13 point something lah, right? We make it 20%, okay? So based on this detection, based on the detection risk, so that here, low detection risk, so we have to accumulate more audit evidence. Later on dalam example, you kena tahu benda ni, ya? Kadang-kadang they ask you to calculate this one. So what is your action later on? So under scenario 1, we need to accumulate more audit evidence. Under scenario 2, kita akan accumulate less audit evidence. Okay, that's the reasons why we calculate the detection risk. Kalau kita tengok kat sini, so high, so low audit evidence, low detection risk, more audit evidence. Okay, faham kelas? So make sure you tahu benda ni, you ingat benda ni, okay? Okay, next one kita tengok audit risk. So audit risk kita ada explain tadi. We do expect few misstatement. Okay, so this one adalah audit risk. So detection risk has direct relationship with audit risk, and detection risk has inverse relationship with high inherent risk and control risk. Kenapa dia kata, kalau kat sini kan, kalau based on the same calculation, tadi kita buat acceptable audit risk tadi 5%. If you change to 20%, so the higher the acceptable audit risk, the higher will be the detection risk. So, jadi you akan accumulate less audit evidence. You boleh test nanti, ya. You buat kat sini 20%, inherent risk 1 times 1, another one 20%, inherent risk 0.6 times, and control risk 0.6. Okay, so kalau you punya acceptable audit risk high, detection risk also will be high. Dia adalah direct relationship. Tetapi dengan inherent risk and control risk, kalau inherent risk you tinggi, control risk you tinggi, detection risk you akan jadi rendah. Okay, faham kelas? Boleh?
Boleh, madam.
Okay. Now kat sini pun ada explain tadi. So I can boleh skip that one. Now tengok what is inherent risk, class. Okay, inherent risk adalah the characteristic of the business. Dia depending on the business, okay. So highly likelihood misstatement by ignoring internal control system. So we can conclude sama ada the inherent risk is high or low. Okay, for the example, inherent risk is high for inventory and warehouse because we do expect banyak misstatement dekat inventory and warehouse. And low for payroll. So payroll dia punya system, dia punya cycle adalah very simple. And then payroll normally dia punya transaction adalah quite routine. Okay. So internal control is ignored by when we set the inherent risk. Okay. So inherent risk kita consider at two levels. Satu adalah at the financial statement level and another one adalah at account balance level. Dia punya tajuk ni lebih kurang tajuk for an error ya kelas ya. Dia punya komponen more or less the same. Okay. Macam mana kita nak identify sama ada the company tu high inherent risk or low inherent risk. Kita tengok kepada a few factors lah. That's the reasons why before you accept the appointment, you need to investigate your potential client. Okay. For example, kita tengok pada nature of the client business, the size, the number of location. Kadang-kadang some business dia punya industry adalah high risk. Jadi dia punya inherent risk adalah high. Some company, for example like IT industry. IT industry because technology change very fast, am I right? So inherent risk adalah high. Tetapi kalau food industry macam tu je kan. So dia punya inherent risk adalah low, okay? So for the example like greater obsolete inventory of electronic manufacturer as compared to the steel, okay? Macam some industry dia adalah high, some industry dia adalah low. The bigger the company, the higher will be the inherent risk. Lagi banyak location, so the higher will be the inherent risk. Okay. The second one kita tengok in term of management. For the example, the management tu baru, just be appointed. Just be appointed as CEO, COO. Jadi management tu dia orang tak familiar dengan company tu, am I right? Jadi dia punya inherent risk adalah tinggi. Management integrity, management attitude, okay, towards fraud and error. Okay, for the example, kalau company tu be dominant by one person, so the inherent risk adalah tinggi. Unusual pressure, kalau very tight schedule, market expectation, ataupun ada other pressure daripada banker, investor and so on, so the inherent risk also high. Okay. Other factors affecting the industry, for the example, katakanlah bahawa the entity position within the industry, they are the follower in the industry. The threat to the entity operate in the high competition, okay, kemudian low ratio compared to the industry, okay, jadi the inherent risk adalah tinggi. Okay, initial versus repeat engagement. Kalau you first time audit the client, so the inherent risk also being considered as high. Inherent risk is normally high in the first engagement. Okay, kadang-kadang ada juga other factors that contribute kepada inherent risk. Other external factors, for the example like economy, legislation, regulation, accounting practice that been used, okay, so that one will affect the client. So under that situation, the inherent risk also high. Okay, second one adalah inherent risk adalah due to the account balance and transaction. So for the example, like result of the previous audit. For the example, previously, bila you conduct audit, you found in previous audit ada material misstatement. So we'll do expect that we might have the same problem for the untuk current year. Okay, so what we need to do adalah you kena plan your audit. You have to do detailed substantive audit procedures. Okay, related party, terlalu banyak transaction between holding company and subsidiary company. Okay, kalau terlalu banyak transaction ataupun the subsidiary company to rely too much on the holding company, the inherent risk also very high. Kadang-kadang due to the non-routine transaction, terlalu banyak sangat non-routine transaction between holding company and subsidiary. Tiba-tiba holding company purchase heavy vehicle daripada heavy machine daripada subsidiary company ataupun purchase some of the property daripada company ataupun give loan, dapatkan loan daripada subsidiary company. That one adalah part of the non-routine transaction. For the example like major disposal of asset, disposal of subsidiary. Okay, kadang-kadang is due to the misstatement made kalau ada complex transaction. Okay, so kalau ada all these things, we consider the company tu adalah high risk company. Okay, judgment is required to correctly recorded account balances and transaction. Terlalu banyak judgment, estimation figures. Kadang-kadang klien tu dah bagi satu estimation figures, kemudian dia tukar lagi dia punya figures. Kemudian tukar lagi, 2-3 kali tukar figures yang sama. The same item, okay? So we know that the inherent risk adalah tinggi. For the example, like allowance for the doubtful debt, depreciation, useful life of the asset, net realizable value of the inventory. All this one accounting, you dah tahu basically benda-benda ni. So other factors to be considered adalah complexity. Okay, kalau ada misappropriation of asset, okay, poor quality of the accounting information system, unusual and complex transaction, particularly at the end of the year. That's the reasons why auditor banyak spend masa for the cut-off procedures. Normally kalau ada macam ada non-routine transaction at the end of the year, so we know that the inherent risk adalah high inherent risk. Apa implication dia? Kalau high inherent risk, jadi we need to accumulate more audit evidence. Okay, so this one you all boleh baca ya kelas ya. Now I go on kepada control risk. Okay, control risk adalah the misstatement occurred after we evaluate the internal control system And based on our evaluation, the internal control system not be able to detect and for an error on timely basis. Okay, so good internal control system will reduce control. Ingat ya kelas, kalau kita boleh reducekan control risk, auditor can reduce the audit evidence. Okay, so your responsibility as the auditor, you need to understand client internal control system. But client internal control system may have the inherent limitation. This one you ada belajar dalam first audit paper. Kenapa ada inherent limitation dalam client internal control system? Kadang-kadang kita tengok kepada cost and benefit. To have perfect internal control system, good internal control system adalah very costly. Some client they need to consider lah the cost and benefit to implement good internal control systems. That's why kita guna perkataan ICS ya. We always use the term adequate internal control system. Okay. Internal control system normally kita just fokus kepada routine transaction and not for the non-routine transaction. Kadang-kadang you might have good internal control system tetapi ada human error. Human error due to the carelessness, okay, ignorance ataupun misunderstanding of the instruction, miscommunication, okay, ataupun some rejection to follow the system, okay. Sometimes kita ada good internal control system tetapi internal control system bypass through collusion of management, or sometimes kita ada good internal control system tetapi client dah expand their business. Bila dia expand their business, so the internal control system is not sufficient anymore. So they need to upgrade the internal control system. Okay, control risk can be considered at two levels, sama juga dengan inherent risk. So they can be considered at the general level and specific level. General level is more on the management attitude. Kalau you perhatikan management attitude ni banyak influence di internal control system. Some management they are very focused on ICS, some management they just ignore ataupun they tak take serious on internal control system. Some company they are willing to invest on ICS. Some company they are not willing to invest on internal control system sebab dia tak nampak benefitnya. So benefit of having good internal control system, you tak akan nampak immediately, okay? Tetapi the process ataupun benda tu will save your company sikit-sikit. Okay, that's why sebab dia tak nampak benda tu macam dia tak nampak benefit tu dan tu juga kan. So that some of the company they are quite reluctant to invest on ICS, okay? So what we need to do adalah we need to evaluate the internal control system, okay? The key point kat sini ya kelas ya, control risk will be higher if internal control system is not effective. Kalau internal control system is not effective, the control risk adalah high, so we need to accumulate more audit evidence. Okay, bila you nak accumulate more audit evidence, you need to set materiality level. The materiality level will be set at the lower level. Itu you kena tahulah semua all those relationship. Faham ya kelas? Nampak tak? Boleh ya?
Boleh madam.
Okay, now kita tengok detection risk. Okay, detection risk adalah the remaining risk. Okay, you dah ada substantive audit procedures, tetapi you dah conduct substantive audit procedures but still not be able to detect fraud and error. Okay, so this is the only risk that can be controlled by the auditor. Okay, so because we cannot control inherent risk and control risk. Okay, so after assessing the inherent risk and control risk, auditor should be able to decide what level of detection risk will bring the audit risk to an acceptable low level. Okay, so macam mana you nak reducekan how to reduce the detection risk, kena ada appropriate planning. kena ada appropriate direction and supervision. The nature of substantive audit procedures normally macam bila you accumulate audit evidence kan, you akan go back kepada PDO, CIM, AMI, right? So you kena tengoklah which audit evidence is more reliable and which audit evidence is less reliable. Technically, we say that external evidence is more reliable than internal evidence. Okay? Macam kalau based on observation tu cuma reliable during the observation. Okay? Kalau macam physical sighting tu macam is reliable, tetapi untuk the existence of fixed asset saja. Tetapi it does not macam you nampak asset tu dekat company tu kan, you know the asset exists, am I right? Tetapi it is not necessarily belongs to the company, so you kena double check with the documentation. Okay? Kemudian timing adalah when you conduct the audit procedure. Okay? Untuk timing, for the example, kalau test of control adalah kat sini I tak ni ya. So test of control kita nak tengok the effectiveness of the internal control system. Okay, untuk test of control normally kita akan buat during the interim audit lah. Okay, dan untuk balance sheet item, untuk asset and liability, substantive test ya. Substantive test normally kita akan buat during the final audit. Substantive test kita ada 3 ya. Untuk test of transaction, you akan buat during the interim audit. Test of balances kita akan buat during the final audit. Kalau test of balances you buat during the interim audit, dia tak appropriate kelas ya. Kalau you buat during the interim audit, you kena buat lagi sekali during the final audit. And analytical procedures you akan buat during the planning, detection as well as during the final audit. Okay. Last one adalah kalau you expect banyak material misstatement, you have to conduct detailed substantive audit procedures. Okay? Dah nak habis sebenarnya ya. I habiskan ya. Sebab some of you ada program lain lepas ni ya. Detection risk, baca kelas detection risk ni apa? So you dah conduct substantive test, analytical procedures. Okay, so auditors responsible to design audit procedures so that you be able to provide reasonable assurance that we be able to detect if there is any material misstatement. Okay, the relationship ni yang penting you kena tahu ya. If inherent risk, control risk high, the detection risk will be low. Kalau detection risk low, apa jadi pada you punya audit evidence? Kita akan accumulate more audit evidence. Okay? Nampak ya kelas? Faham tak? Inherent risk high, control risk high, detection risk low. So, the implication adalah we accumulate more audit evidence. So, I tulis kat sini ya. Kalau inherent risk high, control risk high. So apa jadi pada you punya detection risk? Detection risk low. Kita tengok check kat tadi ya. Dekat mana tadi? Kat sini kita calculate tadi kan. So detection risk will be low. So apa jadi kalau you punya calculation you detection risk low? So we have to accumulate more audit evidence. We need to increase the sample size. Okay. So another one adalah detection risk. Detection risk also will be higher if auditors not competent and do not conduct the audit with due care. Okay. I pergi laju sikit. Okay, this one adalah this table. Kita go to the extreme one ya. Highest. High control risk, high inherent risk. Dalam ni detection risk ya. Detection risk. So detection risk will be lowest. Lowest meaning that more audit evidence. Okay. Kalau control risk you low, detection risk you, inherent risk you low, so detection risk will be high, okay? High meaning that less audit evidence. Faham ya kelas? Boleh faham ya? Kadang-kadang tak boleh ulang banyak-banyak sangat. Nanti lagi banyak ulang lagi opening. I nak you all baca this one. This one ni kan macam dia, macam kadang-kadang macam mana you nak accumulate more audit evidence okay? Kalau you nak accumulate more audit evidence, so kita akan set kita punya materiality level at the lower level. Kita akan set kat sini ya. Kita akan set the materiality level at the lower level. Tapi kadang-kadang based on your assessment, control risk is low, inherent risk is low. So you plan to increase your materiality level. Okay? So you nak set materiality level kat sini. Okay? Okay. So by right, kalau kita set, the higher we set the materiality level, jadi kita punya sample size will be smaller. Betul tak? Betul tak kelas? Macam X and Y. Kalau you set materiality level at X, so your sample size will be more. Kalau you set the materiality level at Y, the sample size will be less. Betul ke kelas? Betul tak? Betul ke? Make sure you all faham tau. Soalan dia banyak tau bahagian kat sini dalam final exam. All of you okay? Cepat kita dengar.
Okay, madam.
Boleh faham ya? But sometimes you rasa internal control system dia bagus and then kita nak set materiality level at a higher level, but at the same time we do not try to reduce the sample size. Okay? You nak ambil same number of sample size. Okay? So what you need to do adalah you need to increase the percentage of the sample size. That's another one lah yang you boleh nampak ya. Soalan dia nanti kita akan discuss banyak soalan, then you can see lah macam mana soalan dia boleh tanya relationship in so many ways. Okay, jadi you kena tahu semua jenis relationship. Okay, you baca kat sini. There is inverse relationship between audit risk and audit evidence. Inverse relationship between audit risk and the amount of audit evidence. Okay, jadi bila you nak support you punya audit opinion, the lower the level of audit risk will be achieved, the greater amount of audit evidence is needed. Meaning that kalau you nak reducekan audit risk, you need to increase the audit evidence. Okay. So the same thing detection risk. Katakanlah bahawa you first time audit your client, you punya knowledge adalah very limited, am I right? Okay, you are not competent enough to audit that client. You know that you punya knowledge adalah very limited and you are not familiar dengan that industry, okay? Jadi macam mana you nak kurangkan the detection risk? You accumulate more audit evidence. Okay. Inherent risk and control risk has direct relationship with the audit evidence. Kalau inherent risk tinggi, control risk tinggi, audit evidence pun tinggi. Kalau inherent risk rendah, control risk rendah, jadi the amount of evidence adalah lesser. Dia adalah direct relationship. Okay. Inverse relationship between evidence and audit risk and detection risk. Tetapi direct relationship between audit evidence and inherent risk and control risk. Boleh faham kelas? Boleh ya? Ada lagi ke? This one, I nak tanya dalam you punya tulisan ni ada tak? Yang I tulis ni. You boleh baca kat sini ya? Inverse relationship. This one adalah the relationship between evidence and materiality. Okay. Inverse relationship between materiality and audit risk. The lower the materiality level, katakanlah bahawa you set the materiality level at lower level. I contoh sini ya kelas ya. you set at 20,000. Okay. So the higher the audit risk, okay. Kadang-kadang kalau you set the materiality level too low pun actually tak bagus juga ya. Sebab kalau you set the materiality level too low, there is a possibility that your sample size banyak contain yang item-item yang small item. Faham tak kelas? Let's say kat sini, kita ada materiality level, you set sama ada you boleh set at 10,000, at 100,000, 200,000 ataupun 500,000. Katakanlah bahawa auditor A dia set materiality level at 100,000. We know that kalau you set materiality level at 100,000, you have to accumulate more audit evidence, am I right? Tetapi kita takut your audit evidence, the sample yang you pilih adalah bahagian yang bawah-bawah ni aja. Yang rendah-rendah, amount yang rendah. Amount yang tinggi-tinggi, you tak pilih sebagai your sample size. Tapi kalau you pilih pun very small amount. Okay. Jadi under the situation, the risk is also high. Okay. Jadi apa yang kita kena buat adalah we need to increasekan our materiality level. Okay. So for example, kalau you reduce materiality amount daripada 1 million kepada 100,000, then you gather the same audit evidence, normally the audit risk will be increased. You all faham ke? Faham tak?
Faham,
Ya,
Madam.
okay. Macam kalau kat sini kan, let's say, you ada 100,000, another person 500,000. Kalau you guna the same quantity, so it will increase the audit risk. So apa yang you kena buat adalah, kalau you 50,000, maybe you boleh ambil 20 sample size. Tetapi kalau you set at 100,000, you kena pilih 40 sample size. So kita nak ensure your sample size at here, you cover semua benda-benda yang material. Okay? So in order to make it same level of audit risk, jadi what we need to do adalah, ini pun soalan selalu tanya dalam exam ya. Bukan dia bagi senario lah, so you kena argue, okay? So in order to obtain the same level of audit risk for 100,000, the auditor would have to obtain additional evidence about possible misstatement in the interval from 100,000 to 1 million. Okay? Meaning that you have to increase the sample size. You tak boleh kata, okay, I nak letak materiality level 500,000, materiality level 200,000, okay, ataupun 200,000, tetapi sample size I nak sama. Tak boleh lah ya. Sebab once the lower your sample size, you need to accumulate more audit evidence. Kalau tak, it will lead kepada high audit risk. Okay. Faham? Sorry I dah terlebih masa sebab ada some of you ada program lain lepas ni. Okay, I just nak inform you all. So untuk tajuk ni dah habis ya. So kita ada 2 more topics juga. Next week ataupun nanti petang nanti, I will share compilation question untuk tajuk ni dulu. Untuk tajuk Myths and Materiality. Dan untuk next class kita akan discuss more question, kita akan discuss banyak soalan untuk tajuk risk and materiality so that you get better understanding on this topic. Okay? So that's all for today class. So see you all on Friday tu I tak sure, I kena check dah, I rasa 17 hari bulan I punya ni. Nanti I kena check, kalau I kena tukar tarikh masa, so we try to make it on Wednesday ya class ya. Nanti kita discuss balik. Boleh?
Boleh, Madam.
Okay, bye. So see you all.
Thank you, Madam.
Okay, bye.
Thank you,
Okay,
Madam.
Madam. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.